Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey, everybody. It's March 12th, 2025, National Working Moms Day. I thought every day was Working Moms Day. What's different about today from all the other days? Well, for one, I'm offering you a replay of a previous episode on this podcast, my interview with Lori Mihalich-Levin, who's the founder and CEO of Mindful Return. After returning to a full-time law practice from maternity leave, Lori discovered that she did not have the resources she needed to manage her life in the ways she wanted to. She created Mindful Return to help parents transition back to work after parental leave. Mindful Return offers a multitude of resources for working parents and programs that employers can offer to their employees. And she's created chapters of Mindful Return across the U.S., United Kingdom, India, and South Africa. So I thought it would be helpful, especially in our employment climate today, to revisit my conversation with Lori. So please join me in welcoming Lori once again. I am so excited to introduce my guest today, Lori Mihalich-Levin. Lori believes in empowering working parents. She is the founder and CEO of Mindful Return, author of Back to Work After Baby, How to Plan and Navigate a Mindful Return from Maternity Leave, and co-host of the Parents at Work podcast. She is a healthcare lawyer in private practice. Her thought leadership has been featured in publications including Forbes, The Washington Post, New York Times Parenting, and Thrive Global. Please join me in welcoming Lori Mihalich-Levin. Welcome, Lori.
Thank you, Tammy. It's a real pleasure to be here with you today. Thanks for having me on.
I am so excited to have you here. So, Lori, as you know, on Work from the Inside Out, we love to begin at the beginning. So take back to some of your earlier or formative years and tell us how did things begin for you?
I admit that going back to the earlier years brings up complicated feelings for me. I grew up in central Pennsylvania, and I lived in a household where there was a lot of violence and drinking and things like that. And so I am very happy to be at a point in my life where that is no longer the situation that I'm in. But I do believe that a lot of what I do today is informed by the early trauma that was happening. On a lighter side, I did very much want to be a ballerina as a young child, and danced in the Nutcracker at the Central Pennsylvania Youth Ballet and was like very into dancing for a while. I also was very into music. I started violin in 4th grade and piano in 3rd grade, and I played violin all the way through college and still play today. So it's something that provides me with a lot of joy and a really sort of helpful outlet. The last thing I'll say is that I guess I kind of did know from an early age, probably because I always loved reading voraciously and writing, that I wanted to become a lawyer. When I was in middle school, I had to write a paper about what I wanted to be. And I wrote that I wanted to be a lawyer, except I recall in the paper that I didn't know how to spell lawyer and never looked it up. And so I wrote Layer. And therefore, I guess I wanted to be a layer. And I
love all those little tidbits that we remember.
Yes.
Years, and it sounds like, well, first of all, thank you for sharing the highs and the lows of your young years. And it's nice to hear that even though there was, I'm sorry to hear there was trauma, but I think there's something, maybe for me, soothing to hear about how music and dance played a role in your early life. And just wanted to pick up on the violin that you're still playing it now. Do you play by yourself? Do you play with a group? I'm curious how that's played.
Yeah. So parenthood put a bit of a kink in my, violin passion. I did play, I live in Washington, D.C., and I did play in a chamber music group here and an orchestra here for a while. I also did prior to the time when my kids were born. I was a volunteer violin teacher in an after school program at a DC public school that didn't have any, strings. And so that was super fun. Now I just play, occasionally for fun at home. And I have a friend who plays the cello, and she was in a similar boat. She played it growing up, and then she had a kid and whatever. So she and I get together to play duets now, which is super fun.
Oh, that's wonderful. I just think about how many of us played as kids and
Yeah.
kind of dropped it. And I think that there's something wonderful about carrying that thread through into
True.
adulthood.
Yeah. Another blessing for me of the pandemic was that the studio where my sons were taking piano lessons closed. And rather than just stop their piano education, and at some point I just wasn't really interested in moving it virtual, I started teaching them. And it was something I swore I would never do because I didn't want to get into battles with them over practicing and whatever, but I did. And, several years into the pandemic, I'm still their piano teacher and I love it. And it's just like a fun way for pairs of us, one at a time, to connect at the end of the day. So that's been fun.
That's wonderful. And it's
Yeah.
wonderful that they allow you to teach them.
Yes. We do bite-sized increments. We learn
Yeah.
two new measures per day. That's our goal. We don't get crazy. Once they learn their 2 new measures, they can go off and do other things. But we try to keep it reasonable.
Actually, that's kind of a cool way to do it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of music in your house. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes. We have the Sonos player. We've got the instruments. Yes, exactly.
Great. So take us forward from there. You had a musical and a somewhat difficult childhood. You danced, and what happened after that?
Yeah. Well, I guess I'll just say there's, the bright side, the light side and the dark side of the music and the dancing. Is the light side is the joy and the spirit, and the dark side is the perfectionism and really competition that one can get into around it. Today, fast forwarding today, I do have a daily yoga practice that I think is probably a result of the fact that I danced as a kid and really care about moving my body, and I still play the music. But fast forward, I went to college, and for me, college was very much sort of a liberation and a eye-opening awareness of the fact that I didn't have to live in a world where everyone was screaming at each other all the time, which was great. I was a public policy major in undergrad. I did a French minor. I moved to France for a year after college.
Wow.
On a Rotary fellowship. And that is where I met my wonderful husband. He is from New Jersey, but he happened to be in France at the same time. We met actually on September 11th, 2001, which is sort of a crazy date to meet. And fast forward a couple of years, I moved back to the United States to go to law school in Washington, D.C. He wound up moving to Washington, D.C. to go to business school. And that's when we started dating. And fast forward even further, I finished law school, I clerked for a judge, went to a law firm, then went in-house, and in the meantime had gotten married and all that good stuff, and ultimately had my babies, which is what prompted the creation of the business that I now run.
Right. Well, I want to unpack the past a little bit more, but that's okay. It gives us a context. So you graduated college. You had been a public policy major. I'm curious, were you still thinking about being a lawyer or a layer at that time?
Yes. Either of the two, absolutely. Yes. Probably the first year of college, I was a little unsure about what I wanted to be. And then by the time I got to the second year to sophomore year, I was pretty confident I wanted to go to law school afterwards.
Oh, okay.
And for me, I didn't want to become a courtroom lawyer. I sort of knew early on I wanted to become a policy or a regulatory lawyer.
Yeah.
And I love language. I love policies and how they all fit together. So yeah, I did sort of know from early on. And I focused when I was in college because I was also getting a minor in French, on studying immigrant women living in France who were victims of domestic violence, and that intersection of immigration and how, we in different cultures interact with one another in the home, largely based on what I'd experienced. But that's what I dug into for my senior thesis and things like that in college. Yeah.
Well, I'm curious, where did you go undergrad?
I was at Princeton in New Jersey.
Oh, a little school in New Jersey. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. It's interesting for a few reasons. First, when you said, I wanted to see the intersection between language and policy, that's not something I typically hear from people who want to talk about policy. And I to work in public policy myself, and I have talked to a lot of people about this. And usually the first thing they talk about is the types of policies that they're interested in, the area of discipline. So I was wildly curious when you said policy, where you were going with that, and to hear your interest in immigration and domestic violence and those things. That's fascinating that from a fairly early point in your college career, you had this vision of a very interdisciplinary view of what you were interested in. I would say is probably unique for a college sophomore. You were at Princeton, so you were amongst a lot of probably thinking types of students, but still, I don't know the degree to which Princeton really encourages that kind of
They do. Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, I mean, my major was what was called at the time the Woodrow Wilson School of Public and International Affairs. They've since changed the name to SPIO, which is the School of Public and International Affairs, but it's an intentionally integrated interdisciplinary major, which, some people poo-poo the idea that you have this interdisciplinary approach as an undergrad and say that you should focus on one specific area and go deeper in that. But I really wanted to combine the politics and the economics and the sociology and all of those things. Also, I'm just thinking about that layer. Like, I guess I did want it to be a layer. I wanted lots of layers in my career.
So a layer came, it was meant to be. You were a visionary, even from a young age onward. I love that. I know where I went to Hampshire College in Amherst, Mass. And Hampshire is all interdisciplinary studies. Nothing
very cool.
Not interdisciplinary. So I'm a big fan of interdisciplinary studies, but this is fascinating. So when you decided to go live in France after college, what was your vision for that time? What made you decide to go live in France?
Right. So I had always wanted to study abroad, but being a major in what was then called the Woodrow Wilson School limited your study abroad opportunities. You were only permitted junior year to go to the one or two places that the school sent its junior year cohorts. And I really wanted to go to a French-speaking country. So in lieu of that, I did one thing. I spent a summer working in Colmar, France, at a prefecture there, a government office there, through a Princeton exchange program, because Princeton was the sister city of Colmar in France. And I got a taste of being there for a couple of months and said, I really want to come back and improve my French and learn more. And I found out through Princeton about some fellowship programs for after college. And at the time, there was a Rotary Ambassadorial Scholarship Program that basically funded 1 year of study in any language that had a Rotary Club. And the only obligation was that you give 10 to 15 talks to Rotary clubs over there about your own culture. And when you come back, you do the same. So I applied for this Rotary Fellowship Program, won the scholarship, and simultaneously applied to law school with basically a plan A and plan B, and said, well, if I don't get the scholarship, I'll go straight to law school. And if I don't, get into law school, whatever. But I managed to get into law school and won the fellowship, and ultimately just deferred my law school admission for a year.
I see. So when you went off to France on the Rotary, you had a clear plan of coming back and going to law school then.
Exactly. Yes. It wasn't an open-ended, I'll just move to France and see what happens. I wanted to go to this one specific political science school in the southern part of France and just do that for a year. They had a 1-year certificate program. And so I went over to do that.
Oh, okay. So what was the certificate in specifically?
It was Certificat d'études politiques. It was like a political science certificate from this Institut d'études politiques. It's the IEP in France. It's just one of their sort of like specialized schools. And they have a program that's specifically for international students to come over and take a 1-year program.
Oh,
yeah.
What an amazing opportunity.
It was
and
life-changing.
And then you met your future husband that year as well. Yes. But you didn't really start dating till you were back in DC.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. He was over there on a Rotary Fellowship a few years before, and he did not have a plan at the end and decided to stay.
I see. So, okay. So you did a similar fellowship as well.
Yeah,
And then you returned to DC. So you did law school in DC, is that right?
I did. I went to Georgetown. So I moved to DC directly after France, which was 2002.
Were you still interested at that point in immigrant law or
I was, but I guess I had decided that I moved a little bit away from the immigration issue and was more focused on domestic violence when I started at Georgetown. And I took a domestic violence clinic, which allowed us to actually go into court our
uh,
third year and represent victims. And simultaneously, I did a summer associate position at a law firm where I dabbled in all the different regulatory areas and fell in love with the healthcare practice in one of these groups. One thing I didn't mention was that I did have also this sneaking aspiration to become a doctor, but I couldn't stand blood and guts and I wasn't good at the math and science. And so, sort of the combination of health law and that interest with public policy sort of merged. And anyway, so I ended up not going into domestic violence for my full time job, in part because I needed to pay off my law school debts. And
yes.
in part because for me, it had become just too emotional and I was ready to sort of move on from doing that work.
That makes a lot of sense. Another parallel between us in terms of our interests. I worked in the field of domestic violence for
Mm,
years myself. So I can understand the perspective there. And yet working in healthcare, there's a lot of overlap there
mhm, mhm.
between
Yeah,
healthcare and the needs within domestic violence. So that's how you got moving towards the healthcare piece of
exactly. It was dabbling over the summer
yeah,
in a summer associate position, and dabbling in lots of different practice areas within a firm and
yeah.
saying, okay, well, what do I like? I knew I wanted regulatory and I tried out energy and environmental and I tried out telecom regulatory and I tried out healthcare. And the telecom was interesting, except it was really a practice at this one particular firm that was focused on radio. And I just couldn't see radio being the future. I really wound up getting passionate about the work that the healthcare group was doing. They were representing hospitals and health systems. It was a provider side practice and really clicking with the people in it and appreciating the person who was at the time the head of the group who took me under his wing and
Oh,
mentored me. Yeah.
no. So is that where you ended up working after you graduated?
It is. Yeah. In fact, I summered there after my 1L year, first year. After my 2L year, I split my summer between that firm and another firm. And then after 3L year, while I was preparing for the bar, I even worked there for a couple of weeks. And then I clerked for a year. And then I went back there full time,
Oh, I
finally,
see.
like many years later.
So curious, you said that after your L2 year, you worked there and another firm. How'd you manage
Yeah.
that?
Well, a lot of firms allow you to split your summer between two firms so that you can choose between them.
Oh, wow.
And
I'd
because,
not heard that before. Okay.
well, I mean, this was also, pre 2008, where all the rules were a little different at firms and
Oh, I
people
see.
were heavily recruiting law students,
I see.
big
Okay.
classes of summer associates, and they were just trying to woo more and more people. Also, because I had spent a full summer at this one firm, I knew what it was like.
Yeah.
And they wanted me to come back just for part of the next summer to
I
remind me that they were there.
okay. I
Yeah.
see. Got it. So you really developed those relationships and then you clerked for a year. What
Yeah.
is that? That's something that's typical. A lot of people do that, right?
Yeah, a fair number of people do. It's basically you are working for a judge for 1 year, doing behind the scenes stuff and helping them write opinions. And I had no intention, as I mentioned, of becoming a trial lawyer, but I thought this is my one chance to see inside the judicial system
Yeah.
and to learn what it's about. And everyone told me that there was no downside to my taking a year to do this. And they were right. So I went and clerked for a judge here in Washington, D.C. and had a fantastic year. The judge and I are still in touch. His daughter babysat our kids for years until she went off to college. It was just a really wonderful relationship to build too.
Yeah, well, it sounds like, Lori, based on what you're saying, that's something that you've been able to do. It sounds like in a lot of ways, you've maintained a lot of nice relationships over the years.
Yeah. I mean, for many, that's I think why my husband and I are married because we maintained a relationship and we both like to say that we don't lose people that we care about. And he actually wrote a book called Relationships to Infinity, the Art and Science of Keeping in Touch. So it's a topic that is very much part of the
Oh,
fabric of our home.
I love that. We'll have to include his book in the show notes.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. It's great to hear about that because I think sometimes we get so busy building a career, building a family, growing our own selves personally, professionally, and all that. And you've got 2 active kids, a husband, daily yoga practice, all these things that you're doing, working some things at the kids' school. It would be very easy to allow certain relationships to just dissipate for no
Yeah.
other than that you're just busy day to day.
Yeah,
So,
everybody is. Yes.
and yet it sounds like you've maintained some of these relationships that came, that you developed almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if that's something that you had to be intentional about or whether that just comes very naturally for you, how that's worked for you.
I don't think it's an or. I think it's both. I think
Yeah.
because my husband and I prioritize it and talk about it, it's something that is top of mind for us. I'll tell a quick story. This summer, we spent 3 weeks on a road trip with our kids because they are at this age where they love traveling. They're good in the car. They still are willing to be seen in public with us, all that good stuff. And so we went up through New England and Canada and came back through Niagara and back to DC. And along the way, as we were planning the 3 week trip, we said to ourselves, okay, so who do we want to see in the different cities where we know we're just going to be as a tourist?
Yeah.
And we mapped and we reached out to people and said, hey, will you be around? And if so, let's have dinner or let's get together. And so we did, we took our trip. And at the end, we got back and we said, wow, we actually saw a lot of friends. And we counted it up. And I think we saw somewhere between 28 and 29 people in those 3 weeks. And we said to ourselves, like, well, that's what we do. We get back in touch. And one of my husband's main points of his book is it is never too late to reach out to someone who you cared about before. And there are so many mental blocks. He has this Bermuda Triangle of keeping in touch and why we get lost in it. But when it comes down to it, people are just happy to hear from you. So I think when we take the attitude that there's no reason not to reach out, then we do it. And we're always happy whenever we reconnect with people.
Right. And there doesn't have to be any reason behind it other than just to say,
Hey.
I was thinking of you and wanted to connect. And
exactly.
and I agree with you. I often have clients who, I'm encouraging them to reconnect with people and they say, oh, but I don't know, I haven't talked to them in years. And I say, well, if they reached out to you after 10 years, how would you feel? And they say, oh, I'd be delighted. Well, what makes
There you go.
But we're so quick to doubt ourselves in some way, right?
Yes.
And so I love that. I love that you and your husband are so aligned on this and that you're modeling this for your boys. It's such a wonderful thing. And I have a hunch, I could be wrong. I have a hunch that your boys might always be happy.
That would be lovely. I'm not counting on it, but it would be lovely.
I know you can't count on it. You can't. But at the same time, some of us, and I will speak for myself, have been very fortunate in that way. That my daughter's 28 now, but she still doesn't mind hanging out with me, never did. And she had her moments, but they were just moments. So just don't assume that they won't want to hang out with you.
Thank you, Tammy. Your story shall continue to inspire me with hope.
I please allow that to happen. Just like we assume someone might not want to hear from us, don't assume, right? You know what happens when you assume anyway.
Oh, yes.
All right. So I like that. I like that phrase. We don't lose people. I love that. So you went back and you joined that firm.
I did.
We're doing a number of different things, it sounds like. And you stayed with them for a number of years. I'm making that assumption.
Well, I tried to stay with them for a number of years, but my entire healthcare practice group up and moved to another firm after about, I don't know, maybe 2 years. I was there for 2 years. And then the leader of the practice group that I worked in left. And so my choice was to stay and not do healthcare anymore or to go with the group. So I left with the group and went to a completely different firm. I enjoyed the people I met at the firm, and it wasn't the firm that I had come to know and love over the couple of years that I had spent, preparing to go to a firm. And so I spent about a year there and was ready to move on after that point.
Yeah.
It coincided with Obama's election, and a lot of talk about health reform. And I was starting to get an itch around doing more policy work. We're back to the earlier public policy days. And so I decided that I wanted to do an in-house policy role and went to the Association of American Medical Colleges to do healthcare policy on the inside of an organization rather than working for companies on the firm side.
So tell us a little more about that work. What was the focus of that work?
That work is really what ultimately wound up defining my current legal practice. But most people know that the Medicare program in the United States pays for the healthcare of our 65 and older population.
Yeah.
Most people don't know that Medicare also funds residency programs in the United States to the tune of about $14-ish billion a year. On the theory,
know that.
yeah, on the theory that if you don't train physicians, there won't be anybody to care for the 65 and older crowd. And so my role there was really as a policy advocate for teaching hospitals, helping them understand and influence all of the regulations that surround these graduate medical education payments in the Medicare program. Yeah, it's not great cocktail party conversation. It's sort of in the weeds, but it's what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about helping teaching hospitals to train residents and to helping hospitals that aren't training residents to become teaching hospitals.
I'm curious about
Yeah.
this. Was this to train specifically residents who would be focused on gerontology or?
No, it's actually to train the entire physician workforce. Yes.
Oh.
So a resident who is specializing in pediatrics has the same amount of funding coming in on their behalf as a resident who is specializing in geriatrics.
Through the Medicare program.
Yes.
Well, that's really interesting. Wow, you're right. I bet a lot of people don't know
Don't
that.
know that, yes. Even the residents themselves often don't know this.
So you did a lot of work advocating, and I assume when you advocate, you're educating only like you're educating right now. So that's fascinating. And you went to the Association of American Medical Colleges and did that policy work for years. You're not with them now, though. Am I right about that?
No, I was there for 6 years, and that's actually where I was working when I had my two boys.
Uh-huh.
And then about 4.5 or 5 years into being there, I started this side gig called Mindful Return in sort of 20-minute increments per night.
Right.
And at some point, about a year and a half into growing that business, I wanted some daylight hours to be able to grow that business further. And it's a program that helps new parents transition back to work after parental leave, which is something I struggled with. And I actually, perhaps strangely, decided to go back to a law firm after being in-house for 6 years. But I went back to a law firm as a partner on a 60% schedule. And I did that for 6 years as well. And then last summer, I left the firm and started my own firm. Yeah.
Got it.
I have a legal niche now that is a centimeter wide and a million miles deep, all around how teaching hospitals get paid by the Medicare program to train their residents. So I went back specifically to do that. And the other 40% of my work week was spent growing Mindful Return.
Got it. And how did you get the idea to start Mindful Return? What did it look like when you first started it? How did you get it up and running? I know that you were inspired by your own experience.
Yes.
But I'm curious, what is it that you expected you would be doing? Did you have a vision that it was going to start as a business, or were you thinking, I'm just going to do this thing?
I wasn't sure what to call it at the beginning. It was like passion project / yes, business. I mean, the short story of why I started it was sheer desperation and a real lack of quality resources in the marketplace. So
Yeah.
I went out looking for things that would help me to become a calmer working parent as I transitioned back from maternity leave. And I went back to work after baby number 1, and it was challenging. And after 2, and I went off the rails. I'm sure that I had some undiagnosed postpartum anxiety. And I wanted a course that could tell me how to make that transition into and out of parental leave. And I found tons of baby-focused resources, which is cool and great. We need the baby-focused resources. I could learn how to massage my baby. I could take a course on how to puree baby food, the whole thing, but nothing about me and my own personal and professional identity transition that was happening. And so I took a course, an online course that I found that was called the Abundant Mama Project. And it was all related to how to view the abundance in life instead of the overwhelm. It wasn't targeted at working parents. It was just targeted at moms generally who are feeling overwhelmed. And
Sure.
I felt this amazing sense of relief in hearing that I was not the only one struggling with this, that we were all trying to be grateful for having food on the table and being angry that the Cheerios were all over the floor. And I said to my husband, who he is an MBA and an entrepreneur, and I'm like risk averse lawyer, not thinking entrepreneurially, but I said to him, there really should be this abundant mama type of course, but for people transitioning back to work after parental leave. And his quip to me was, well, what are you going to do about it? And I said, well, I don't know what I'm going to do about it, but I'm going to do something about it because it's ridiculous that no one's talking about this. So I sat down, opened up my laptop and was like, I'm going to write a blog post. And
Ah,
my hands were shaking and I was getting all clammy. And I don't know why I was worked up because probably 3 people read that blog post, but it was a start of something for me. And I wrote the blog post, I put it up. I decided I wanted to create a course akin to the Abundant Mama course, but for brand new parents and the transition. And I got the idea that employers really should be offering this to their employees. And that's where the idea for Mindful Return began as an employer side business model.
okay. As an employer side business model.
Mhm. Yeah. We have people who take the course because they found out about it and they just want to sign up themselves. But the majority of people who take it are there because their employer is offering it to them.
Okay. Most of your customers are employers.
Exactly. Yep.
Or
Who want to retain their working parents and have them come back after parental leave. Yeah.
right. No, I can see where that would be even more important now
Mhm. Yes.
than ever.
Yes. Mhm.
Um,
Absolutely.
And I could imagine also employee assistance programs would also be interested in this. How has Mindful Return evolved over the years? And what are things looking since you became a full-time entrepreneur?
Yeah. So it's definitely shifted from passion project to official side hustle to my main gig, right? Now I practice law as my side gig. And this is the full time project. We've grown to having 91 different employers offer it as a parental leave benefit right now. Overlapping with what we talked about earlier with my international passions, we have chapters in different countries now, which I'm so excited about.
Chapters.
Chapters, yeah.
Wow.
So we started off with just the mom focused course. And very shortly after launching that, maybe about a year after starting to onboard employers, we heard the message loud and clear that employers wanted to offer a program to both their new moms and their new dads. And I said, absolutely, we need gender equality in this space. So I teamed up with a wonderful guy to create the dad version of Mindful Return. So for a while, we just had a mom version and a dad version. A little while later, I had someone reach out and say, we really need a program like this, but for parents of special needs children. So we adopted a special needs version. In the early days of the pandemic, a woman who is based in London, who is a former big law attorney turned coach, reached out to me and said, I heard about Mindful Return from another mom at my daycare. I really think that we need Mindful Return in the UK. Could we bring it here? My initial response, Tammy, was, no, I don't have the bandwidth for that because it's the pandemic and my children are at home and I have to teach them and run my company. And then after things calmed down a couple of months later, I reached back out to her and said, okay, we can talk now. But I was just in survival mode in the early days of the pandemic. Anyway, so she reached out and ultimately we launched the UK chapter of Mindful Return. We adapted the content to the UK context, and now we have cohorts that are running in the UK. A similar story of someone reaching out from India and also from South Africa. So we now have chapters there. And we translated the program into Spanish that launched earlier this year. And we have a Portuguese language translation coming out later this year, really at the request of employers who have employees in Latin and South America and want to be able to provide it to more people. And just having so much fun with it, having those international connections and feeling like the program is really making a difference. What keeps me going is hearing the parents who say, I feel not alone. I feel like I worked out the issues before I went back to work. I feel more confident now. I feel like I don't have to tell myself all these stories that make me feel guilty anymore. That's what inspires me.
Yeah. So you started off creating these courses, but now you've got chapters. It sounds like a sense of creating a sense of community for people.
It's always been about community because the courses that we teach are cohort based. So you are in it with a group of people who are returning around the same time you are. We have an alumni community of a couple thousand parents now at this point, and we do monthly calls for the alumni. And it's been very much about making sure that you are not feeling isolated and alone in new working parenthood, which is what I felt and why I was crying on the kitchen floor too often.
Right.
Yeah.
So you have cohorts that start on a regular basis.
Every other month. Yeah.
And then the chapters are geographic.
Exactly. And they run cohorts on the same schedules, for example, but they're cohorts everywhere. So there's a cohort in the UK, there's a cohort in South Africa, for example. And then we have what we call our global cohort, which people can join from anywhere, but it's in English. So,
Right. And now you have people who started these in other places or asked to start them. Are they working for you, or is it like a franchised model, or how does that?
Yeah, we have a revenue share.
Okay.
And they are incentivized to bring people into the program. And
sure.
we've been able to talk to our existing clients, for example, and say, oh, we see that you have an office in London. Would you like to start offering this to your UK employees, for example? And that's been a really great way of spreading the word.
Mm-hmm. So it's been an organic growth.
Yes.
It sounds like, right?
Exactly.
You really haven't had to do a lot of marketing or anything.
Yeah. I mean, marketing is a constant in, I think, everyone's life if you have your own business, and it grows on itself, right? I like to say that law firms tend to be lemmings. So once you get a handful of law firms who are all using it, then the others want to know what's going on and want to be on board too. I wouldn't say that there's no marketing involved. Marketing is something that I think is just an ongoing piece of any business.
Right.
But it does grow and evolve on its own.
Yeah, I can easily see how that could happen. Now, somewhere in the middle of all this, you also authored a book and you started a podcast.
Yeah.
So tell us about the book. Tell us about the podcast.
Yeah.
When was the book written?
So the book is called Back to Work After Baby: How to Plan and Navigate a Mindful Return from Maternity Leave. And Back to Work After Baby, I don't want to say it birthed itself, but I didn't sit down to write the book. I blogged for years on my website. And after about 2 years of blogging, I sat down and said, oh, I think I've sort of already written a book. And so I spent about 4 or 5 months weaving together all of the writing that I had done over the prior 2 years, and a book was born. And the podcast, I actually didn't start the podcast. I was approached by someone, a wonderful lawyer named Tom Spiegel, who he himself had started the Parents at Work podcast a couple of years earlier. He reached out and said, I really want to do this with somebody. Like, I can't do this podcast thing alone anymore. So would you be interested in co-hosting the podcast with me? So I listened to some episodes. I got really interested. I'd always had this itch of wanting to do a podcast. And I thought, here's a podcast that already exists and I don't even have to start it. So I joined him as co-host, and then the pandemic hit. He runs his own employment law firm and has 4 children. And he reached out to me and said, I can't do it anymore. Yeah. So I took over the podcast and I said, well, this is the Parents at Work podcast. We need a dad on the podcast. I happen to live with someone who also wanted to be a podcast host. And so I reached out to my lovely husband and said, would you like to co-host this with me? And he and I have been co-hosting it for the past couple of years now.
Oh, wow. And what happens on the podcast?
Sure. It's called Parents at Work. We pick an industry or sector or role. We talk to usually 2 moms and 2 dads who are in that space. And we talk about what it's like to be a working parent in that role, in that space. Okay. And what experiences professionals tend to have as working parents and how they feel they can influence the narrative around working parenthood in the role that they have.
I love that perspective. That's really unique.
So it's been super fun, and we've met some really wonderful people.
I bet. What would be the best way for people to learn about your work and how they can reach you?
I'd say the best way is to go on to the Mindful Return website, which is mindfulreturn.com.
Let me ask you one more question. Since you've made a number of different transitions and decisions along the way in your own career, and a lot of the people who listen to this podcast are considering what their next move might be, making either a small or a large transition. What would be a key piece of advice you might give somebody who's thinking about their next move?
Yeah. I think two things come to mind. One is, and they're related. One
Sure.
is experiment, and two is that it doesn't have to be an on-off switch. You don't have to jump over to something else tomorrow, but
Right.
rather experiment with little pieces of things. Say, wow, this brings me a lot of joy. Let me see how I can incorporate it and do it for 20 minutes a day and put yourself on the hook and get an accountability partner or set your timer for 8 p.m. and from 8 to 8:30, do that thing that you're super jazzed about and see where it leads. And know that you can make massive shifts over time in baby increments, right? It's been 8 years for me that
Right.
I've, started mindful return and have been moving along the continuum. I didn't want to give up my legal career though, and it turns out I didn't have to.
Right.
So, shifting over time is possible.
Shifting over time is possible. I like that. And I also can appreciate that you didn't want to give up your legal career. Did you ever think that you might have to?
Well, I had people telling me, oh, you should go do mindful return full time. And if nobody will take you seriously in investor world or whatever, if you don't devote your entire life to this business that you're creating. And I said, well, maybe not, but I'm not hanging around investor world. I definitely had people encouraging me to give up the law to go do that full time. And I was just feeling probably the external buzz in my ears as opposed to what I actually wanted to do. Also, there were things about
as opposed to working from the
inside out. Yes, exactly. And there were things about being a partner at a law firm that I became ready to shed and said, yeah, get me out of that administrative whatever.
Right.
But I was still able to hold on to the pieces of it that I really value and care about. And I'm still doing that.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And it sounds like even though there may be moments where you're thinking, this is all a little too much, you've found ways to calibrate. And you've got your yoga practice and your family, I'm sure helps to keep things in check sometimes. I know children always help us to bring things back into focus.
Every day. Yes.
Yeah. And this is great. Well, Lori, I can't thank you enough for bringing this perspective, both for working parents, but also for working professionals to think about how to navigate a career that really can help you work from the inside out. And just wishing you all the best as you go forward with everything.
And thank you for having me on, Tammy, and for taking me through this journey of revisiting my life in so many ways. I've enjoyed the ride. Thank you.
Thanks for sticking around to the end of my interview replay with Lori Mihalich-Levin. What is your key takeaway from our conversation? If you are interested in any of the resources mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them in the show notes on my website at tammygoulerloeb.com/podcast. Just look for episode 270. And while you're there, you can also subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes. Did you know that ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts can help this podcast reach more people? Please help me to inspire more people to move their careers in meaningful directions by clicking on the Apple Podcasts button. Leave an honest rating and brief review there. Are you anticipating your next professional move? Check out my award-winning book, Work from the Inside Out, Break Through 9 Common Obstacles and Design a Career That Fulfills You. It's available through my website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, or through your local library. You can also help sustain this podcast by buying me a cup of coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TammyGL. Since this podcast is self-funded, your support is acknowledged and appreciated. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. Bye for now.